Good morning or good afternoon, and thank you very much for attending this presentation entitled Translanguaging in Basque and English Practices and Attitudes of University Teachers and Students. The study we are presenting today is part of a more extensive investigation in which we carried out a comparative analysis between BMI, Basque Medium Instruction, or subjects taught in Basque, and EMI, English Medium Instruction, or subjects taught in English, focusing on three main themes: interaction between students and teachers, EMI students' motivation, and translanguaging, which is the issue we will talk about today. The presentation is structured as follows. We will start with a brief introduction on the growing presence of English at university. Then we will define the term translanguaging, and we will briefly review the literature. This will lead us to present our research questions. And after describing the study, we will analyze the results and present our conclusions, as well as some future lines of research. Internationalization has become a priority objective in Spanish universities as well as in universities all over Europe. To achieve this objective, educational institutions have been taking a series of measures, among which the offer of EMI stands out, since English has become the lingua franca both in the academic and scientific fields. In the University of the Basque Country, we find the peculiarity of the coexistence of two official languages, Basque and Spanish, to which English is added as an L3 through EMI. This makes it an ideal multilingual context to analyze translanguaging. But what is it translanguaging? At the end of the 20th century, at the beginning of the 21st, some scholars questioned the traditional methodologies where languages remain separate in the classroom context. The advocates of this new trend, however, believed that the trend to maintain languages separate was detrimental for students, as it missed the opportunity to use the different code varieties that by multilingual student possess as a pedagogic strategy. In 1994, the Wells Kane Williams coined the term translanguaging, referring to the planned and systematic use of two official languages in one lesson. That is, the teacher uses, for example, the L1 as the medium of instruction in one half of the lesson and the L2 in the other half of the lesson. This assumption of translanguaging represents bilingual pedagogic strategy, which consists of the alternation between of bilingual students' languages in a systematic way. Since that first definition, the concept has evolved, and today we can distinguish two main versions of translanguaging: the weak version of translanguaging and the strong version of translanguaging. In this section, we will briefly expose the most significant differences of these two versions of translanguaging. Those who adopt the strong version of translanguaging recognize the existence of the so-called languages like Spanish, French, Japanese, etc., from a socio-political perspective, but not from a cognitive perspective. Under this prism, the linguistic repertoire of multilingual students does not necessarily correspond to one language or another, but rather the speakers have their own and unique linguistic and communicative repertoire from which they select the resources they want to use. Therefore, the speaker's linguistic repertoire does not have to correspond to any language established by grammars, dictionaries, or schools. The weak version of translanguaging is defined as the ability of multilingual speakers to settle between languages, treating the diverse languages that form their repertoire as an integrated system. The biggest difference between both conceptions is that the weak version of translanguaging, unlike the strong one, recognizes and supports the borders between languages, although it promotes their softening. That is, it advocates a a dynamic bilingualism where the boundaries between languages are soft but still present. What is clear is that both conceptions rule out the rigid separation between languages that has traditionally occurred in the teaching context. The following is an example of translanguaging based on the recordings from our study. In this case, this is an EMI classroom, and the teacher says, "So what do you say against that?" And a student answers, "They put aranceles in Spanish." And the teacher answers, "Tariffs," which is the English translation of aranceles. Well, this would be an example of translanguaging. Translanguaging has become a highly topical issue and to a certain extent, a controversial topic, especially in those contexts where the educational tradition encourages the exclusion of the L1 from the classroom context. This is also the case of the Basque Country, where the general trend at university and in the entire educational context has been to keep languages separate from each other. We count with previous studies analyzing translanguaging, for example, carrying out comparative analysis between CLIL and EFL, or between EMI and EFL, or focusing on translanguaging in EMI and CLIL. And these studies have shown that translanguaging is habitual irrespective of the context, although its presence varies from one context to another. We also count with the studies conducted in the Basque Country, focusing on EMI, teachers' beliefs regarding translanguaging, or implementing translanguaging pedagogies in EMI, for example. However, we consider that our study is innovative since we compare two mediums of instruction, Basque and English, and to our knowledge, no previous study has carried out such a comparison. The objective of this study is to know how translanguaging happens in EMI at the University of the Basque Country, while we compare these practices with the same subjects taught by the same lecturers in the BMI group. That way, we control the variables, teachers and subjects both being the same, while we examine the impact of the medium of instruction on translanguaging. These are our research questions. Are there significant differences regarding the amount of translanguaging in BMI and EMI? Who is involved in translanguaging in BMI and EMI? When does translanguaging occur in BMI and EMI? What are EMI students' opinions regarding translanguaging? The participants of this study were two teachers from the University of the Basque Country, concretely from the Faculty of Economics and Business, and both teachers taught their subjects in two parallel groups, an EMI group and a BMI group. Teacher A taught the subject economic history, while teacher B taught the subject business, economics, organization, and management. Teacher A had been teaching at university for 10 years, two of them as an EMI teacher, and Professor B had been a university teacher for 14 years, and this is his first year as an EMI teacher. Regarding the linguistic requirements, teacher A was certified to teach at the University of the Basque Country in Basque, Spanish, English, and French, and teacher B was certified to teach in Basque, Spanish, and English. However, although both teachers were multilinguals, their L1 differed. Since teacher A's mother tongue was Basque, although he was also fluent in Spanish, and teacher B's L1 was Spanish, even though he was also fluent in Basque. Therefore, in BMI, Teacher A taught in his first language and teacher B in his second language. And in the case of EMI, both teachers taught in their foreign language, English. As for the participating students, we have on the one hand the students who attended the classes of teacher A and or teacher B. As can be seen in the in the case of BMI lessons, we only counted with local students, and in the case of EMI, we counted both with local and Erasmus students. On the other hand, we have the 455 students who participated in the questionnaire, 344 of whom were local students and 111 were Erasmus students. Among the students who participated in the study, we came across a large number of different L1s like Basque, Spanish, Korean, French, Italian, Japanese, etc. We relied on videotaped lessons and a questionnaire to collect the data. First, we attended a videotaped 29 lessons that constituted a total of 39 hours of recording. The objective of this recording was to find out if translanguaging happened both in BMI and EMI groups, see what type of translanguaging happened and which agents were involved in it or in what context happened. Second, we also designed a questionnaire in order to know EMI students' opinions and attitudes towards translanguaging. The questionnaire was designed in English and it consisted of a Likert scale going from 1 strongly disagree to 6 strongly agree. It consisted of 77 items, 12 of them being related to translanguaging. Third, the tool we used for the subsequent observation and analysis of the recorded lessons was based on the communicative orientation of language teaching observation scheme. This is an example of one of our SCFLT tables, and as you can see, we indicated the time at which the different activities and episodes took place, or the language used, and then we marked with an X some other aspects like aspects while we observe them in the recordings. In addition, we use the same color in different sites to indicate the different interpretations of an interaction. And the tool used for the subsequent statistical analysis was the statistical package for the social sciences SPSS software. We will present now the results of this study. This table shows the translanguaging observed in the classroom recordings. We have separated it into 3 categories. The translanguaging found in the materials, texts, videos, etc., teachers translanguaging, and students translanguaging. The table on the left shows the number of translanguaging episodes per hour, and the table on the right shows the significance after comparing teacher A and teacher B and BMI and EMI. We have marked in green those cases in which we found significant differences. Regarding the translanguaging in the materials, in the materials used in classrooms, we did not find any significant differences when comparing teacher A and teacher B, nor when comparing BMI and EMI. In relation to teachers translanguaging, we did find significant differences when comparing BMI and EMI. However, these differences were due to teacher B, since we did not observe any difference in the case of teacher A. Concretely, teacher B translanguaged more in Basque medium instruction than in English medium instruction. Finally, we found more student translanguaging in teacher A's lessons than in teacher B's. As we explained at the beginning of the presentation, in our study, we also analyzed classroom interaction, and the results showed that students participate significantly more in teacher A's lessons than in teacher B's, which may have also influenced students' translanguaging. Moreover, we did not find differences when comparing students' translanguaging in Basque medium instruction and in EMI. Another aspect that we analyzed is the type of translanguaging or the context in which it occurred. We distinguished two categories: content-related translanguaging, which is more formal, and non-content-related translanguaging, which is more informal. In this table, we followed the same methodology as in the previous one, and we marked in green those cases in which we found significant differences. What were the results? We found more content-related translanguaging both in teacher A's and teacher B's lessons than non-content-related translanguaging, but only when Basque is the medium of instruction, since we did not find any difference in EMI regarding the use of one type over the other. Besides, in BMI, translanguaging occurred in a more formal than informal context, which could be regarded as striking, because it seems that there is a greater tendency to resort to translanguaging in informal contexts. We will present now the results related to students' opinions and attitudes towards translanguaging. These data were obtained through the aforementioned questionnaire. First, we divided the items corresponding to translanguaging in two categories: positive attitudes towards translanguaging and negative attitudes towards translanguaging. Subsequently, we performed the Cronbach Alpha test, and these categories obtained a satisfactory internal consistency reliability. As can be seen in this table, students' attitudes diverge. In fact, 47.9% of the students showed positive attitudes towards translanguaging, while the remaining 52.1% showed less positive attitudes. That is, the student sample was split in two, half being positive and the other half not positive. However, students showed more positive attitudes when we presented them some specific cases. This is the case of item 54, where 65.3% of the students accepted that if the teacher is speaking in English and at a given moment she or he cannot express an idea or does not remember a term, I think it is appropriate that she or he changes to Basque or Spanish. Nevertheless, students were quite sure that they did not want to see an increase in the presence of Basque or Spanish in EMI classes, since 92.1% of them gave this item a negative punctuation. Consensus was also observed in the following category, since 67.4% of the students showed negative attitudes towards translanguaging. For example, 73.6% of the students considered that the use of Basque or Spanish in EMI classes could lead to an excessive use of these languages instead of English. Therefore, we can answer our research questions as follows. Are there significant differences regarding the amount of translanguaging in BMI and EMI? Yes. We found more teacher translanguaging in BMI than in EMI, but only in the case of teacher B. Who is involved in translanguaging in BMI and EMI? We found teacher translanguaging, student translanguaging, and translanguaging in the materials both in BMI and in EMI. When does translanguaging occur in BMI and EMI? In BMI, we found more content-related translanguaging, and therefore this happened in a more formal context. Nevertheless, we did not find any difference in the case of EMI. What are EMI students' opinions regarding translanguaging? In general, students were divided between those who saw positive and occasional use of translanguaging and those who were more reluctant. But in general terms, students saw more negative than positive attitudes towards translanguaging. These results lead us to a main conclusion. Teachers and specifically their teaching style have more influence on translanguaging than the language of instruction. And why is this so? Because we found more translanguaging in those lessons with greater interaction, in this case teacher A's lessons, and the language of instruction did not seem to influence the amount of translanguaging, except in the case of teacher B, because he translanguaged more in BMI than in EMI. As for future lines of research, we believe that the following two issues should be considered. It would be interesting to analyze the students' translanguaging when they work in groups, since it is in this context where most interaction among students occur. And it could be interesting also to identify what are the reasons for teacher B to translanguage more in BMI than in EMI. And this would be the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And now if you have any question, we will do our best to try to answer it. Thank you very much.